Scientists have just confirmed something that should have been impossible. Deep inside 91 ancient human skulls, recovered from a muddy pond in Florida, the brains are still there. Not fossils, not dust, actual preserved brain tissue, complete with folds, ridges, and even traces of DNA still locked inside. These brains are over 7,000 years old, older than the pyramids of Egypt, older than the invention of writing, older than the wheel. And a new Oxford University study has revealed something even more unsettling. These ancient minds may hold information that is rewriting everything we thought we knew about the first humans who lived in the Americas. Because the DNA extracted from them matches no living tribe on Earth today. They are a vanished people, a lost civilization, and what scientists are learning about them right now is forcing them to throw out the textbooks. For most of the 20th century, archaeologists painted a very simple picture of early humans in North America. They were described as small wandering bands of hunters, primitive people living short, brutal lives, moving constantly in search of food, incapable of building complex societies. The textbooks were clear. Nothing sophisticated existed on this continent 7,000 years ago. But a forgotten pond in Florida was about to prove every single one of those assumptions wrong, in a way that even today scientists are still struggling to fully explain. The location is Titusville, Florida, a quiet town on the Atlantic coast, just a few miles from Cape Canaveral and the Kennedy Space Center. While humanity was launching itself toward the stars from one end of this town, the deepest secrets of the American past were sleeping at the other end. A shallow pond, less than 1 acre in size, completely ordinary, or so it seemed. Because what lay beneath the water at the bottom of that pond would become one of the most scientifically significant sites in modern archaeology. The first signs of what lay below came from an accident. A backhoe operator was clearing the muck at the bottom of the pond to prepare the land for a new housing development. What he scooped up from the mud in his metal bucket was not a rock, not a tree root, not anything he expected. It was a human skull, with something heavy still inside. At first, the workers feared they had stumbled onto a crime scene. Police were called. 2 archaeologists walked away saying excavating an underwater grave was impossible. The medical examiner examined the bones and declared them modern remains. Everyone gave up. The skull sat forgotten in a construction trailer for weeks. But then one scientist at Florida State University took a closer look, and what he recognized in those worn prehistoric teeth would launch one of the most extraordinary research projects in American history. Radiocarbon dating revealed the bones were over 7,000 years old. The oldest burials at the site date back to roughly 8,120 years before present, meaning these people had been lying in that pond for longer than any written language had existed anywhere on Earth. Even the very newest research, using the latest dating techniques, continues to confirm these ages with even greater precision. What followed was a massive excavation effort. Scientists installed 158 underwater pumps around the pond, removing up to 1,000 gallons of water per minute. They used chopsticks to carefully scrape peat away from ancient bones. The lead researcher described the experience as digging chocolate mousse underwater. Slowly the pond surrendered its secrets, and what emerged from the mud was something that no one was prepared for. The final count was 168 individuals: men, women, children, newborn infants, and elderly people in their late 60s. Nearly half of them had died before reaching adulthood. Every single body had been buried in the exact same position, curled up in a fetal pose, lying on their left side with the head pointing west and the face turned to the north. Each one had been wrapped carefully in woven cloth, tied with cord, and pinned to the bottom of the pond with sharpened wooden stakes driven through the burial shroud to prevent the body from floating to the surface. This was not random. This was not chaos. This was a cemetery, a sacred place, a ritual repeated again and again across more than 1,000 years of continuous use. But the real shock came when researchers opened the skulls and found the brains still inside them. Out of 168 skulls, 91 contained preserved brain tissue. Let me say that again. 91 ancient brains, shrunken to perhaps 1/3 of their original size, but with recognizable folds and ridges, intact cell structures visible under the microscope, and extractable DNA still locked inside them. According to researchers, this should have been impossible. Human soft tissue is supposed to decompose within weeks in Florida's hot, humid climate. The brain itself is known among forensic scientists to be one of the very first organs to liquefy after death. So how did 91 of them survive for 7,000 years? That question has haunted science for decades, and only very recently have researchers begun to uncover the answer. The bottom of the pond contained a thick layer of peat, a dense, dark, waterlogged soil that had been accumulating for nearly 11,000 years. This peat had three unique properties working together. First, it was completely oxygen-free. No oxygen means no bacteria, and no bacteria means no decomposition. Second, it was cold and dark year-round, slowing down any chemical breakdown. But the third property is what made this site truly unique on the entire planet. European peat bogs, which have preserved famous bodies like the Tollen Man in Denmark, are extremely acidic. They preserve skin and hair but dissolve bone completely. The peat in this Florida pond was the exact opposite. It was chemically neutral. This perfect balance preserved both soft tissue and bone at the same time. Such a combination is found almost nowhere else on Earth. It was a miracle of geochemistry frozen in time, and recent science has taken this mystery even deeper. A groundbreaking study from Oxford University led by forensic anthropologist Alexandra Morton Hayward was published in the Proceedings of the Royal Society B. The research team compiled a global archive of more than 4,000 preserved human brains from across 6 continents. They found that preserved brains from this Florida pond, along with a handful of others from the Ice Age, are among the oldest surviving human soft tissues on the planet. The team proposed a new theory. Proteins and fats in the brain may chemically fuse with iron and copper in the surrounding environment, creating a tough molecular structure that resists decay for thousands of years. The research is still ongoing right now. Teams are actively analysing these ancient brains using cutting-edge techniques that did not even exist a few years ago, and what they are beginning to uncover about these vanished people is extraordinary. For the brains to survive at all, every single body had to be buried within 24 to 48 hours of death, before tropical heat could destroy the soft tissue, which means these people were watching for death. They were ready for it. They had a system. Researchers today are still trying to understand what drove this level of ritual precision, and inside those brains, locked away for 70 centuries, was something even more astonishing: ancient DNA. Using the latest genetic sequencing techniques, researchers have been analysing the mitochondrial DNA extracted from these preserved brains. What they have found is changing the story of the Americas. These vanished people carried genetic signatures of the founding populations that crossed from ancient Asia into North America tens of thousands of years earlier. But there is a haunting twist that recent analysis has only made more mysterious. Their specific genetic line does not match any living Native American tribe today. Their descendants either went extinct entirely, or their lineage was so thoroughly erased by time and catastrophe that no modern trace of them remains. They are a vanished people, a lost branch of humanity, and the only voice they still have is the pond that swallowed them 7,000 years ago. But there was more, much more, because this was not just a cemetery. It was a time capsule of a civilization no one had ever imagined existed in ancient America. As excavations progressed, researchers began pulling something else out of the peat: cloth, actual woven fabric, 7,000 years old, still soft and flexible after emerging from the mud. This should have been absolutely impossible according to everything archaeologists believed about early Americans. The old theory said these people were simple nomadic hunters. They did not weave. They did not have looms. But the evidence here was undeniable. 86 fragments of hand-woven textile were recovered from 37 different graves. The largest and oldest collection of ancient fabric ever found in this part of the world. 7 distinct weaving techniques were identified, including close diagonal twining, open twining, and balanced plain weave. Fibers were spun from cabbage palm and saw palmetto plants, carefully stripped, processed, and transformed into cord, bags, mats, blankets, and burial shrouds. Recent expert analysis has concluded something even more shocking. Some of the finer fabrics could only have been produced on a stationary loom. A loom cannot be carried from camp to camp by nomadic hunters. A loom is a permanent heavy piece of weaving technology that requires a settled community, which means these people were not wandering. They were living in one place. They were sedentary. They had villages, workshops, and craft traditions that had been passed down across generations. 7,000 years ago, in Florida, People were weaving cloth as fine as modern linen. This single discovery alone has forced archaeologists to rewrite what they teach about early American civilization, and the artifacts kept coming. Atlatl spear thrower weights, some broken in life and carefully repaired. Stone projectile points made from rock quarried more than 80 miles away, proving sophisticated long-distance trade networks existed. Bone awls, antler tools, pins carved from mountain lion bone, shark-toothed knives, and hammers shaped from incredibly dense manatee ribs. A hollow bottle gourd dated to 7,290 years old, the oldest such container ever found in all of North America. Necklaces of fish bones and palm seeds and shells, draped around the throats of young women and small children. Every object told the same story. These were not primitive survivors. These were skilled artisans, traders, and craftspeople living lives far more complex than anyone had dared imagine. And their diet? Modern isotope and chemistry analysis of their bones and stomach contents has revealed a rich, varied existence. They ate deer, raccoon, opossum, freshwater fish, turtles, wild grapes, elderberries, prickly pear, and hickory nuts. Despite living only 30 miles from the ocean, they consumed almost no seafood. Their teeth were worn down by dietary grit by middle age, but they had almost no cavities. Plant specialists have identified 31 different species from the site, including several known medicinal herbs like elderberry and holly. These substances were found inside the digestive tracts of some burials, possibly making this the earliest archaeological evidence of medicinal plant use in all of the Americas. But the most profound discovery is not technological. It is something far more human, and it is something that continues to move researchers today. Among the 168 burials was the skeleton of a teenage boy, roughly 15 years old at his time of death. When researchers examined his spine, they found he had been born with severe spina bifida, a serious neural tube defect that would have left him paralyzed from the waist down. He had lost one foot, and the stump showed signs of healing over many years. His leg bones revealed a 2-year-long bone infection that raged before his death. He could never have walked. He could never have hunted. He could never have fed himself. And yet, he lived to 15 years old, which means for at least a decade his people carried him everywhere. They fed him. They cleaned him. They tended his wounds. They loved him. This single discovery rewrote everything science believed about compassion in prehistoric humans. Early American hunter-gatherers, according to the old textbooks, were supposed to be harsh and practical. They were supposed to abandon the weak to survive. But these Florida people, 7,000 years ago, did the exact opposite. They cared for their disabled. They treated their elders. They buried their 2-year-old children with beaded necklaces. They wrapped the fingers and toes of the dead individually with cord, as one excavator described, as if preparing them for a long journey ahead. Everything about this site whispers of tenderness, of love, of a civilization built on care, not cruelty. So why did they bury their dead underwater in a pond? That is a question scientists are still actively trying to answer. Some researchers believe that water was seen as a sacred barrier that kept the spirits of the dead from returning to disturb the living. Similar water burial traditions appear at other Florida sites like Little Salt Spring, Bay West, and Warm Mineral Springs, all dating to the same deep era. And more recently, a new site was discovered 21 feet underwater off the coast of Manasota Key in the Gulf of Mexico, another archaic period underwater cemetery, suggesting this tradition was far more widespread than anyone had imagined. Researchers are actively surveying the Florida coastline using new underwater technology right now, looking for more sites like these. They believe other ancient cemeteries are still hidden beneath the water, waiting to be found. Even today, this Florida site continues to make news. Researchers are applying modern DNA sequencing techniques to samples that were frozen decades ago, using technology that simply did not exist when the site was first excavated. Every few years, a new scientific paper emerges with fresh revelations about these vanished people. The recent Oxford study on preserved brains featured this site prominently, and the team has indicated that new findings are still to come. The site itself has been protected as a National Historic Landmark, and the pond refilled with its own peat. There is no visitor centre, no museum sign, just a single quiet marker beside the street. And here is the final astonishing fact. Only half of the pond was ever excavated. The other half remains sealed beneath the water and the mud, completely untouched, waiting for future technology to uncover what still lies beneath. What this site truly revealed is that everything we thought we knew about early humans in the Americas was wrong. They were not simple. They were not brutal. They were not primitive. They were weavers and healers and traders. They carried their disabled children for decades. They buried their dead facing the North Stars. They built a civilization sophisticated enough to leave behind 91 preserved brains and the oldest fabric in this hemisphere. And then they vanished, leaving no direct descendants, no written records, no monuments. Only a small muddy pond in Florida that almost got paved over by a housing project. And here is the most unsettling thought of all. If a civilization this complex could exist 7,000 years ago and leave no trace except a pond that was almost destroyed by accident, then how many other lost civilizations are still hidden beneath the earth? How many other vanished peoples are waiting to be found? The ground beneath our feet holds more secrets than history books could ever contain. Somewhere out there, another site like this is waiting. Another lost people sleeping beneath the water. Another chapter of the human story that no one has yet read. And with the pace of modern science accelerating faster than ever, the next discovery may be closer than anyone imagines. Thanks for watching. If this story amazed you as much as it amazed me, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing so you do not miss the next discovery that might just rewrite history all over again. Until then, stay curious.